Hello, I'm Sarah and I'm from CAMHS, Nottingham City. As part of the How You Doing podcasts, this one is going to focus on worry. The aims of the podcast is, to support you to work with young people who are worried, who are presenting as anxious, and, understand why that might be going on for them. Think about the types of worries that they might have. And I'd hope that by the end of this, you have some practical ideas on how best to support them to manage their worry. So I suppose the first thing we need to think about is, how do we recognise if a young person has difficulties in this area? What behaviours, what presentation, things they might say. So often, worry becomes a problem when you're focused with that worry, when you're spending time excessively worrying. So I suppose it's about noticing any changes in behaviour of that young person. Are they late? Are they early? Are they presenting as though they're really nervous? Do they have trouble relaxing? Do they get tired easily? Do they struggle paying attention or concentrating? Do they get easily upset? They might become irritable, grumpy, or angry. And I suppose those behaviours are masking what's really going on for them. They could be so worried that in order to protect themselves, they're just going to be angry. They may talk to you about muscle aches and pains or tension, having trouble sleeping, or, having restless sleep. And I guess that's because worry, it puts our brain in that kind of fight or flight mode. It's sensing danger, isn't it? We're overly concerned about this thing. So, okay, we've got to go into fight or flight. And that releases adrenaline. And, as we know, adrenaline pumps quickly around the body and it has an effect on our blood. It has an effect on our heart rate. And that can make us sweat a little bit more. It can change our breathing. We can breathe a lot quicker. It also affects the digestive system, which is why those butterflies happen. And I guess it's really important to share with the young people the link between what goes on for their body and what goes on for their mind, and how that influences their behaviour. I think the more young people learn and understand about themselves and the way our brain and body work, the kinder they can be to themselves. Whereas if they're busy kind of not understanding what's going on for them and don't know how to manage these feelings, then things can deteriorate, can't they? They can get worse. I suppose it's also important to, highlight there is a difference between worries. On the one hand, you've got the practical worries, the things that you can do something about. And on the other hand, you've got the hypothetical worries, those what ifs, those things that young people don't have any control over. And it's really important to encourage young people to know the difference between the practical and the hypothetical or imaginary worry. Why is it important? Well, worry can consume so much. It can get in the way of our enjoyment. It can get in the way of friendships. We can become avoidant. Being overly worried or anxious, that's really linked to mood as well. It can bring us down. So let's think then about ways of managing the worry. Ways of supporting those young people you work with and see every day. I wonder if, it could be best for you to get a group of young people who you think might be able to work together in a safe environment and put themselves out there, but actually it's contained. Some young people might work best one-to-one. Peer mentors are a great way. You could train a couple of people up in these worry techniques and then have them support other people who are presenting with worry difficulties. Whatever works best for you in your provision, really. But some ideas. Okay, so practical worry. If it's something you can do something about, like, oh gosh, I'm going to be late for English, or I'm going to miss that bus. Okay, well, that's a practical worry. You can put a plan in place to manage that. And I would direct you to the problem solving technique. So there is a podcast. There's a podcast for young people, and there's one for educational staff too. And that talks through the 5 steps of the problem solving technique. So I'd direct them to that if it's a practical worry. Hypothetical worries, a little bit more tricky, because that's when our mind takes over. And I always explain to people that sometimes our mind thinks things that we don't want it to think. So using the example of, don't think of a blue tree. Don't think of its blue leaves. Don't think of it, those blue birds sat in that blue tree. I'm guessing it's all you can think about. So what you actually need is a distraction. So let's think about a pink elephant. Hopefully you're not thinking of a blue tree anymore. And that's a really good example to use with young people. You can tweak it to what suits you, but just to kind of prove that sometimes our mind can think those horrible things that we don't want it to. So we have to train it otherwise, and we have to distract it. One idea is a worry diary. So actually tracking those worries, writing them down, whether that's on a post-it or a note on the phone, something there and then when that worry comes into their head. And they can think, okay, can I do something about this now? If not, let's write it down and I'll deal with it later. But it's good to kind of track how worried they are. So like on a scale of 0 to 10 or 0% to 100%, but how worried they are in that moment. And then try to promote worry time. So whether that's in your group, or, try and encourage 10, 20 minutes a day. The young person at home can, from 6 till 20 past, they can have that time to worry. They can look back over their diary and they can think about those things they wrote down. And some questions that you could ask them to ask themselves is, how do you feel about it now? Did that thing actually happen? And if it did, how did we deal with it? Are there any worries that are no longer a problem? And if they're not a problem anymore, well, cross them out, rip them out of the book, throw them away at the end of the day. Yeah. I think it is important for young people to know that they have got that time to worry. And by having dedicated time, it means that they freeing their minds up for so much else in the day, for that learning, for that social interaction. They've got more time to think about those things because they know that their worry time comes later. I guess something I would really promote is having an end to that worry time so that the young people don't spend their whole night worrying, for example. So at the end of worry time, go and do a funny dance, or, ring your friend, or check in with somebody, or go and have your tea, something, a distraction to break away from that worry time before it becomes excessive. Some young people, have a worry doll or worry monster, or tell their worries to their dog every night. That can also be a really good idea to promote verbalizing that worry and getting it out there. And once it's out there, it's easy to manage. A problem shared is a problem halved, as they say. Something that I think about as well is self-talk. There's lots of power in language. And usually when we're overwhelmed by worry, you'll hear young people say, I can't do it. This isn't right for me. I can't handle this. I'm going to fail. What if this happens? What if that happens? So I wonder if they could, come up with a script. Maybe you could support them to come up with a script, something that they can tell themselves. For example, this seems big now. I'll write it down. I'll wait until my worry time and I might feel different then. And they could say that a few times to themselves, which is a bit of positive self-talk. I wonder as well if you could, have a little focus on supporting them to turn the what ifs into so whats. So, okay, what if I go and fall over when I walk out of this classroom? Okay, so what if you go and fall over when you walk out of this classroom, and encourage them to tell you what they would do? Probably get back up again, dust themselves off and go and see a friend. But it's about changing that what if to a so what and giving them a bit of a plan to manage. Something that could be a good idea if you were doing a small group, for example, or even, one-on-one, I guess, you could argue the point of the worry. So I like to think about catching the thought. So catching that worry thought and thinking, okay, well, let's debate it. Let's find the evidence for it and the argument against it. And have that healthy discussion between you. A good question to ask is, what advice would you give a friend if they came to you with this problem? I like asking that one. And then we have a conversation about, it's easy to give advice, isn't it? Why don't we take our own? And I guess, another key thing is promoting people being kind to themselves. So I wonder if you could ask the young people that you work with, are there kinder or gentler ways you could be speaking to yourself about this? And it might open up their language and their way of thinking. So, noticing change. I think it's so important that we feed back to our young people what we notice about them, what they might notice about each other, what their friends and family might be saying about them. And that's why the worry diary is great, because they can probably look back on it and notice lower percentages. Or there might be 55 worries a day at the beginning of the work. And then, a few weeks later, there might only be 10 worries a day. So it's important to highlight that change, notice that, and celebrate it too. You might notice that the young people are feeling more confident. You might even set them little challenges in and around the school or provision that you work in to test whether they can overcome their worry. And this will hopefully free them up to spend time doing other things that will increase their mood, overall vibes, because they're spending less time worrying. So alongside this, I hope you have a look at the treatment guide for worry. And there's some really good ideas in there which explain things in a lot more detail than I have today. But, you can keep that hard copy and look over it and use it with your young people. Use it with yourself if you need to. I know I've found myself before kind of catching my thoughts and finding the evidence for and against them. It really does help. There's some useful apps as well. Young people can download them. So Think Ninja's a really good one. And Headspace. There's lots of apps there. So thanks for listening. I hope that's been helpful. Good luck and take care.